The first light of morning spills gently across the Golden Horn, filtering through the mist that hovers low above the water. The harbor is quiet but alive, the faint lapping of waves against the hulls of moored ships forming a soft, persistent rhythm. The masts stand like thin, dark fingers reaching into the pale blue sky, their rigging creaking slightly as it shifts in the gentle breeze. The water glints in scattered gold and silver, each tiny ripple catching the light and reflecting it like scattered fragments of sunlight. Here and there, the wake of a single boat or a small row of gulls disturbs the surface, sending concentric circles of motion outward, mingling imperceptibly with the mist. Along the stone quays, the early stirrings of the city begin. A fisherman lifts a net from the harbor, feeling the slick wet fibers press against his calloused hands. The tang of salt and the sharp, oily scent of fish fill his nostrils as he works with slow, measured movements. His bare feet touch the cold cobblestones, the uneven surfaces pressing into the soft pads, each stone telling the story of centuries of footfalls, carts, and the occasional hooves of horses. He pauses for a moment, leaning on the wooden post of his boat, watching the reflection of the rising sun glimmer on the water. In that stillness, he senses the pulse of the city, the ebb and flow that mirrors the tides themselves. From the narrow streets that wind uphill from the harbor, citizens begin to emerge. A baker pulls open the doors of a modest stone building, feeling the cool morning air sweep past him as he steps into the courtyard. He kneads dough with strong, rhythmic hands, feeling the pliant texture yield beneath his fingers. The warm, yeasty scent of rising bread mingles with the crisp sea breeze, creating a smell that is distinctly Constantinople, a combination of labor, sustenance, and waterborne freshness. Smoke curls upward from small hearths where fires have been stoked to life, carrying with it the subtle aroma of burning wood mingled with spices like coriander or anise, hints of past meals lingering in the stone ovens. Children follow behind, barefoot, their small feet pattering against the uneven cobbles, the sound soft and irregular, broken by occasional giggles and the squeak of carts moving slowly along the streets. They pause to peer over wooden railings at the water below, entranced by the movement of tiny waves catching the light. A young girl leans close to the railing, her breath misting the cool morning air, and she feels the vibrancy of the city beneath her small hands, the texture of rough timber and stone grounding her in this familiar rhythm. Above, the domes and minarets catch the first golden rays. The mosaic tiles of Hagia Sophia glint faintly, muted by distance, and the bells of distant chapels ring slowly, each note falling like a soft echo across the water. The sounds are not hurried. They do not demand attention but exist as part of the city's steady heartbeat, marking time in a rhythm older than any one life. The city seems to breathe, inhaling and exhaling with the tides, the wind, and the movement of its people. Each action, from the baker kneading dough to the fisherman casting his net, is a small part of this vast, interconnected pulse. A woman carries water from a public fountain, the cool liquid spilling slightly over the edges of her clay jar. She feels the heft of the vessel in her hands, the slight chill of condensation on her arms, and the smooth, wet weight as the water sloshes gently with each step. The fountain stone is worn and pitted, textured with centuries of hands and feet, and as she moves through the morning streets, she senses the continuum of human effort that stretches backward in time, from the first foundations of the city to this present dawn. In the quieter side streets, artisans open the shutters of small workshops. A cobbler lifts a strip of soft, oiled leather, feeling the grain under his fingertips, inhaling the faint smell of tanning and wax. He bends to adjust a last piece of stitched sandal, feeling the precise tension of thread against skin, and with deliberate care, he sets it aside to cool in the rising sun. The rhythms of labor are repeated everywhere, the blacksmith striking the anvil in steady, methodical beats, the potter spinning clay slowly on a wheel, fingers pressing and shaping with attentive pressure, the scribe dipping stylus into ink, pausing for the perfect curve of a letter. Each act is deliberate, grounded in materiality, in touch, in the slow meditation of making. As the city awakens, the sensory threads weave together into a tapestry of subtle intensity. The scent of salt and baking bread, the chill of mist and sun-warmed stone, the soft cries of gulls, and the measured clatter of daily life. There is a shared rhythm to all movement, a tacit understanding between people, water, and the enduring city itself. Reflection lingers on the intimacy of this connection. How each person senses the ebb and flow of daily life, how the pulse of activity mirrors the tide, and how the Golden Horn itself seems to guide the city's movements. Even in these early hours, the city's impermanence is apparent. Boats drift slowly in the harbor, tied loosely to posts, their ropes creaking gently as the tide moves beneath them. A seagull flaps past, wings slicing through mist, and a distant bell rings across domes and towers, marking the passage of time without haste. The city is both alive and patient, teaching those who dwell within its walls to observe carefully, to respect rhythm, and to understand that survival, prosperity, and culture depend upon the steady repetition of small, thoughtful acts. By the time the sun has fully cleared the horizon, the streets are populated, the markets beginning to stir, and the smoke from countless hearths rising in gentle columns. Yet the intimacy of the morning remains, a quiet reminder of how Constantinople is more than walls and towers. It is water, stone, labor, and the patient attention of generations. Every sound, smell, movement, and reflection forms part of the city's enduring heartbeat. In observing it, in participating in it with care and mindfulness, the citizens of Byzantium align themselves with the subtle, persistent rhythm that allows a city to endure across centuries. In this still, lingering dawn, one feels the delicate interweaving of human life and environment, the tactile sensations of stone and water, the sense of bread, salt, and incense, the soft musicality of distant bells and gulls. Reflection carries a gentle awareness that life in Byzantium is a dance of observation, repetition, and quiet attention to the world, an understanding that each small act, each mindful movement, contributes to the enduring presence of a city that will survive sieges, change, and the passage of centuries. The morning sun, climbing steadily above the domes and towers of Constantinople, casts long, golden streaks across half-built walls and scaffolding. Dust rises faintly from the worn streets as laborers begin their work in the open yards where stone blocks, timber beams, and clay bricks are stacked with care. The city is still forming itself, not merely in the minds of its citizens, but in the tactile reality of weight, grain, and texture that passes through every hand that touches the materials of construction. Each stone placed is deliberate, every measurement double-checked, every alignment of timber considered with a patience born of centuries of inherited knowledge. Masons crouch over partially carved blocks, chisels in hand, tapping softly but steadily to coax precise angles from stubborn stone. The sound is rhythmic, a gentle percussion that mingles with the distant murmur of the harbor and the faint cries of gulls circling overhead. Their hands feel the coarse texture of limestone, rough yet yielding under careful pressure. Tiny flakes of stone spiral downward with each tap, glinting briefly in sunlight before settling on worn boots and dusty robes. The air carries the scent of mineral dust mingled with the warmth of early sunlight, and as a mason pauses to breathe, he inhales the dry, powdery tang that is as familiar to him as the sea air itself. Nearby, carpenters move with equal care, dragging timber beams along narrow lanes and adjusting scaffolds with hands that know the grain of wood intimately. They feel the subtle difference between oak, pine, and cypress, the weight, the resistance under their grip, the faint aroma that rises when saws bite through the fibers. Nails are driven with measured strikes, and the sound of metal against wood is absorbed into the city's awakening rhythm. A young apprentice watches attentively, fingers tracing the edge of a beam as his mentor demonstrates a joinery technique. The apprentice feels not just the wood beneath his hands, but the invisible lineage of knowledge, the slow accumulation of craft and wisdom passed from generation to generation. Water is drawn from wells in the courtyards, poured into basins to dampen mortar, and carried in clay jars across uneven stone paths. The weight of water in earthen vessels is a constant reminder of balance and care. Workers shift with deliberate caution, adjusting footing with each step, aware that one misplacement could send a heavy block tumbling. The mixture of sand, water, and lime is kneaded with hands blackened by use, fingers pressing and turning until the substance reaches the perfect consistency, a pliant yet firm medium that will hold the city together for centuries. The smell of wet lime, mineral dust, and sun-warmed clay rises into the air, mingling with the salty breeze from the Golden Horn. Every action carries a lesson in observation and mindfulness. Builders pause to consider how sunlight will fall upon a wall, how rainwater will course along the slopes of a roof, how the shadows cast by a column will shift throughout the day. These are not trivial concerns. They are reflections on the city's endurance, its ability to shelter, to define space, and to endure the passage of centuries. Each hand motion, each alignment, each check with plumb and level is part of a meditative process, a rhythm of repetition and reflection that transforms labor into a quiet dialogue with permanence. Children, often trailing behind their parents or playing in safer corners of construction sites, absorb these lessons through observation. A boy traces the edge of a freshly laid stone, feeling the cool surface beneath his small, calloused hands. He watches the precise motion of chisels and hammers, internalizing the patience and care that has gone into centuries of architecture. He notices the way scaffolds are braced, how timber braces shift under weight, and the delicate interplay between stone, wood, and mortar that allows a structure to remain upright against wind, rain, and time itself. In this slow absorption of knowledge, the young ones are learning not just craft, but the subtle rhythm of city life, the unhurried cadence of responsibility, and the enduring value of attention to detail. Amid the labor, the city breathes through the sounds of tools and materials. Hammers tap with a measured cadence, saws rasp quietly, chisels create a soft rain of stone dust. Even the silence between strikes is meaningful, a necessary pause for reflection, adjustment, and awareness. Workers exchange brief, deliberate words, suggestions, confirmations, the occasional caution. But mostly the communication is nonverbal, transmitted through shared understanding, gestures, and rhythm. This quiet, almost invisible coordination is the heartbeat of city building, the pulse that ensures each piece falls into its proper place. The interplay of sun and shadow across the half-built structures is mesmerizing. Morning light catches the edges of masonry, highlighting the meticulousness of each cut, each placement. Scaffolds stretch upward like the skeleton of the city, timber intersecting with stone, each junction a delicate negotiation between materials, weight, and gravity. Builders pause to adjust ropes and pulleys, to test the stability of a block, or to observe the city unfolding from a higher vantage. Their attention is slow, deliberate, and continuous, an internal meditation on form, function, and permanence. As the hours pass, the city's rhythm becomes more apparent. Courtyards echo with the occasional shout or instruction, mingling with the softer, persistent hum of manual labor. The air warms under the rising sun, carrying the scents of fresh-cut timber, wet mortar, and sea breeze. Birds settle on scaffolds and ledges, their wings rustling gently, their calls punctuating the otherwise steady sounds of human endeavor. Each sensory impression, tactile, olfactory, auditory, visual, is absorbed, woven into an ongoing awareness of place, material, and communal effort. Meals are taken in careful intervals, the scent of simple bread, olives, and cheese mingling with the earthy aroma of work. Workers pause, hands sticky with mortar or calloused from rope and chisel, to taste food and sip water. These pauses are as much a part of the rhythm of construction as any hammer strike. They allow reflection, rejuvenation, and consideration of what has been accomplished and what remains. There is a gentle awareness that each small act, repeated with diligence, contributes to the larger goal of a city capable of withstanding time, siege, and the slow erosion of generations. By mid-afternoon, the city is a chorus of movement, sound, and smell. Dust rises faintly from footpaths, carried on the wind to mingle with the briny tang of the harbor. Workers ascend scaffolds with careful steps, pausing to look over the expanse of walls, domes, and streets in progress. Reflection lingers on the temporality of the present, how the hands of individuals transform raw material into enduring structures, how observation, patience, and deliberate effort create not only physical forms but social cohesion, security, and identity. Even as evening approaches, the work continues, less hurried now, with gestures slower, more meditative. The sun casts long shadows over the scaffolds, highlighting the textured surfaces of stone and wood, the interplay of light and form that has been shaped by countless hands. Masons tap lightly, carpenters adjust beams, and young apprentices observe quietly, feeling the weight of tradition and the importance of careful, measured practice. In this slow, attentive rhythm, the foundations of Constantinople are laid not just in stone and timber, but in awareness, observation, and repetition. The city is formed through deliberate action, through the sensitive attunement of human labor to the materials, environment, and enduring patterns of life. Reflection lingers on the understanding that permanence is earned through patience, and that the city itself, a living organism of stone, water, and human effort, grows in harmony with those who build it. By the fading light of dusk, the city stands partially formed, scaffolds silhouetted against the horizon, dust settling slowly onto the stones below. The echo of hammer, saw, and chisel diminishes, leaving behind a sense of accomplishment and quiet continuity. Each block, each beam, each measured placement carries the memory of careful hands, the rhythm of labor, and the patient cultivation of a city meant to endure. In observing, participating, and reflecting upon these acts, the citizens of Byzantium, builders, masons, carpenters, apprentices, and observers alike, become part of a legacy that stretches beyond the visible walls, a testament to methodical care, collective effort, and the subtle, enduring heartbeat of a city prepared to face centuries yet to come. Morning in Constantinople settles gently into the narrow streets that wind between clusters of stone and timber buildings. The early light strikes the domes of distant churches and glints off the copper and bronze accents of merchants' stalls. The air is a quiet mixture of warmth from the rising sun and coolness from the shadows cast by overhanging balconies and archways. The stone underfoot is uneven, worn smooth in places by countless feet over decades, each groove a testament to lives moving rhythmically across the same pathways. Citizens begin to emerge from their homes, stretching limbs stiff from sleep, inhaling the mingled scents of salt water from the harbor, smoke from hearths, and the subtle sweetness of freshly baked bread cooling on stone slabs. Merchants open their stalls with meticulous care, arranging bundles of textiles in neat rows, their colors catching the light, deep indigos, vibrant reds, muted earth tones. Each fold is adjusted so that the pattern faces potential customers, the texture of wool and linen soft to the touch. Pottery, glazed and unglazed, sits beside earthen amphorae, the smooth curves reflecting faint sunlight while the rougher, unpolished vessels speak of utility over artistry. Spices arrive from distant lands, cinnamon, cloves, saffron, and the scents mingle in a heady cloud, drawing the nose upward even as the eyes scan the complex arrangement of goods. The subtle aroma of roasted nuts drifts from small carts, and the gentle clatter of copper pots being set carefully on wooden counters adds a soft, musical undercurrent to the awakening city. Children appear, first tentatively, stepping from shadowed doorways into the brightness of the streets. Bare feet patter softly against the cobblestones, careful at first to avoid the deeper grooves or slippery patches left damp from morning cleaning. They chase one another in loops and patterns, their laughter rising and falling like the wind through the narrow alleyways. A young girl, clutching a small basket, pauses to watch a merchant lay out brightly colored beads, her fingers itching to trace the smooth surface of glass as sunlight catches each curve and swirl. The child inhales the air, salt from the golden horn, smoke from hearth fires, the lingering scent of earth from recently swept streets, and feels the city settle into itself, a rhythm she will learn to move within as she grows. Fishmongers arrange the morning's catch along tables and mats, each silver-scaled fish glinting with damp freshness. The sound of small waves lapping against nearby quays blends with the gentle clink of scales on metal counters. They call softly, their voices a low chant meant to attract buyers without startling neighbors or the local animals. The smell is sharp, briny, and invigorating, an immediate reminder of the city's intimate connection to the sea. Customers arrive in measured steps, pausing to examine each fish with practiced eyes, considering texture, weight, and the subtle glimmer of health in each scale. The process is repeated over hours, fish arranged, inspected, purchased, wrapped in coarse paper or placed carefully in baskets, the ritual of trade reinforcing not only the city's economy but its social rhythm. In the background, the clatter of carts rolling along uneven streets adds a percussive rhythm. Horses, small and hardy, tug carts laden with grain, oil, or firewood, their hooves striking a pattern that harmonizes with human movement. Drivers' voices call out, quiet yet authoritative, guiding animals through narrow passages, slowing for children darting between legs, or for neighbors pausing to exchange news. The air carries the earthy aroma of hay and animal sweat, mingling with the fragrance of baked bread, roasted grains, and herbs sold in baskets that hang from stall corners. Citizens inhale these combined scents and move deliberately, sensing the subtle tempo that governs the city's heartbeat each morning. The market is not only a place of commerce but of observation and learning. Elders watch quietly from shaded doorways, nodding the children's games, the merchants' gestures, the rhythm of buyers moving from stall to stall. Every movement is observed, every pattern noted. The way sunlight hits a vendor's coins and reflects into a buyer's eyes, the way a loaf of bread is held and examined, the way a child pauses to touch a glass bead. Observation is repetition, repeated across seasons, generations, and centuries, teaching patience, discernment, and the quiet understanding of human behavior. It is in these repeated, small interactions that the city's cohesion grows, through ritualized commerce and careful attention to shared spaces. Women move among stalls, baskets balanced on hips, feet sliding lightly across the cobblestones. They stop to select a small jar of honey, fingers brushing over the sticky surface, inhaling the faint aroma of wildflowers and herbs from its origin. A man pauses by a spice merchant, scooping tiny amounts of saffron between fingers, allowing the scent to unfold, his mind tracing the long journey from distant lands to this single morning in the city. Each action is slow, deliberate, conscious, a mindfulness born of repetition, of knowing the rhythm of daily life and the subtle signs of change within it. Voices rise and fall, not in chaos but in a measured cadence. Children cry briefly and are soothed by the touch of hands. Birds circle overhead, their wings cutting through the morning air, their calls adding another layer to the ambient soundscape. The distant clang of a bell from a nearby church signals the passing hour, a quiet marker of time within the bustling market. Each note, each sound, each scent is observed, absorbed, and responded to, forming a tapestry of human experience woven from the slow threads of careful attention and repetition. At the water's edge, sailors begin to unload small boats, lifting crates of oil, wine, and ceramics onto the quays. Their muscles shift in deliberate motion, feeling the weight of each object, balancing the strain across shoulders and backs. The scent of sea brine mingles with resin from the ship's timbers, creating a layered atmosphere that is both invigorating and grounding. They pause to wipe sweat from brows, to glance at the horizon where the water meets sky, and to adjust the ropes securing vessels. Every movement is repeated, practiced, honed by time and necessity, ensuring safety, efficiency, and the preservation of goods and life. As the morning stretches on, the city reveals subtle interactions and lessons. Traders exchange stories of distant ports, sailors discuss changing tides, mothers observe children navigating the busy streets, and craftsmen test the durability of wares through careful handling. All is done with attentiveness, a shared understanding of space and time, and the quiet repetition that allows life to continue smoothly. Reflection lingers on the way observation, patience, and slow mastery of small tasks create a resilient and cohesive society. By midday, the market begins to settle into a slower rhythm. The sun climbs higher, casting shorter shadows, warming the stones beneath feet and revealing the faint glimmer of minerals in cobbles and pottery. Merchants adjust their goods to maintain attractiveness. Children retreat to shaded alleys or small courtyards, and the scent of cooked meals becomes more prominent as street vendors prepare for noon. The city breathes collectively, each individual action folding into a larger, measured movement, the flow of life coordinated by observation, habit, and necessity. In quiet moments, one can stand on a bridge or overlook a square and witness the subtle interplay of sunlight, shadow, human motion, and sound. The eye notices the pattern of carts following worn paths, the glint of sunlight on brass or silver, the soft ripple of water against quay walls. The nose catches the mingling scents of fish, bread, spice, and sea. The mind absorbs the rhythm, the repetition of gestures, the steady progression of day into evening, and the calm coordination of countless lives moving in harmony. These small, persistent patterns are the unseen scaffolding of society, the steady pulse that ensures Byzantium's endurance across centuries. Reflection on this morning in the market emphasizes the slow accumulation of knowledge, skill, and social cohesion. Each citizen, from child to elder, participates in and observes repeated patterns: how to move carefully among crowds, how to handle delicate goods, how to interpret a merchant's expression, how to adjust to shifts in weather, sunlight, or tide. Each moment is both ordinary and extraordinary, simple and profound, a lesson in patience, attentiveness, and the continuity of culture. It is through these repeated, mindful actions that the city retains its strength, passing knowledge from one generation to the next, embedding social rules, ethical behavior, and cultural memory into daily life. As the morning wanes, merchants fold some wares back into chests, children settle into quieter play, and the first signs of midday meals ripple through the streets. The city slows not abruptly but through a gentle cadence, the rhythm of commerce, observation, and reflection folding into a softer, quieter pulse. The air retains the warmth of sun on stone and the lingering fragrances of morning, while the city's inhabitants pause to rest briefly before the next cycle of action. In these careful, repetitive movements, arranging goods, observing behavior, maintaining the pace of commerce, lies the invisible architecture of Byzantine resilience. It is not only in walls, ships, or armies that the city survives, but in the countless small, deliberate actions of its citizens. The rhythm of the market, repeated across decades and centuries, becomes both a mirror and a teacher, instructing patience, attention, and thoughtful coordination. By observing the patterns of daily life, individuals learn their place, understand the needs of others, and contribute quietly but effectively to the stability of a society capable of enduring the tests of time. The morning market, with its mingling scents, sounds, textures, and slow, careful movements, concludes its initial cycle, leaving behind a tapestry of shared effort and observation. Citizens pause on steps, gaze across quays, and inhale the layered air, a combination of sea, stone, spice, and baked grain, feeling a subtle satisfaction in rhythm, repetition, and the enduring continuity of daily life. The city has begun its day, slowly and deliberately, and through these small, mindful actions, Byzantium's heart beats steadily, preparing for whatever hours, years, and centuries lie ahead. By mid-morning, the city's heartbeat shifts subtly, from the bustling rhythm of market stalls to the quieter, slower cadence of worship and contemplation. Sunlight glances across the domes of churches and chapels, catching golden mosaics and illuminating frescoes depicting saints, emperors, and sacred events. Inside these sacred spaces, the air is cooler, thick with the faint, lingering scent of incense, a mixture of frankincense and myrrh, earthy yet sweet, curling in delicate spirals from small braziers. Candles, clustered on stone altars and in iron sconces, drip molten wax onto polished surfaces, each slow fall a gentle, almost hypnotic marking of time. Monks and priests move deliberately through the chapels, their robes brushing softly against cold stone floors. Each step is measured, mindful, part of a rhythm honed over years of devotion. The whisper of cloth against stone, the faint shuffle of sandals, and the occasional creak of wooden pews punctuate the stillness. Hands press against polished stone or clasp together, the warmth of skin contrasting with the coolness of the carved surfaces. These small, tactile experiences are as much part of the ritual as prayer itself, grounding the mind and body in repeated, meditative action. Worshippers arrive slowly, pausing at thresholds to observe the light, the mosaics, and the scent of sanctity before stepping further into the space. Fingers trace patterns in stone, hands lift to touch cool bronze door handles or the edge of icon frames. Every touch is deliberate, a quiet acknowledgement of the sacredness of the space and the continuity of tradition. The faint hum of voices begins to rise in measured cadence. Prayers spoken softly, responses chanted in harmony, the murmur of devotion layering itself over the ambient sounds of stone and wood. The city outside continues at its pace, but within these walls, time feels suspended, elongated by the slow repetition of movement and sound. Reflection lingers on the ways ritual structures perception, allowing worshippers to experience both the present moment and a connection to the generations before them. Each act, lighting a candle, bowing, tracing a cross, is repeated countless times, a pattern that embeds faith into the rhythm of daily life, creating stability amid the flux of the city beyond the walls. Pilgrims enter, carrying small offerings of oil, wine, or simple woven cloth. They step lightly, careful not to disturb the rhythm of the ritual already unfolding. The scent of olive oil blends with incense, a grounding aroma that ties the material to the spiritual. Monks acknowledge these gifts with subtle nods or soft gestures, the exchange quiet yet full of meaning. Observation is constant. Every bow, every careful placement of an object, every intonation of chant is noted and internalized, teaching patience, reverence, and the slow accumulation of sacred knowledge. Light shifts through stained glass and open windows, creating pools of color on worn stone floors. Sunlight warms faces, illuminates icons, and dances across frescoed ceilings. Dust motes drift lazily in the beams, moving in rhythms dictated by the slowest currents of air. The city outside hums faintly in the background, the clatter of carts, the soft cries of children. But within, the repeated gestures and measured sounds of ritual form a temporal island, a space where daily life is both acknowledged and suspended. Candles burn lower, wax forming small, intricate rivulets that pool at the base of holders. The act of lighting, observing, and extinguishing becomes a meditation on impermanence and continuity. Priests move from chapel to chapel, repeating prayers that have been spoken for centuries, their voices steady, measured, and unhurried. Reflection emphasizes that through repetition and attention, faith endures not as abstract thought but as lived experience, embodied in gesture, sound, and space. Even the smallest actions are significant. A finger traces an icon's edge. A foot shifts weight slightly as one kneels. A voice lifts in careful modulation to echo in a vaulted ceiling. Each micro-movement is repeated countless times across generations, embedding resilience, patience, and communal identity into the very body of the city. Observers, novices, pilgrims, and children alike, absorb these patterns, internalizing rhythm and devotion as quietly and thoroughly as if it were part of their own breathing. The auditory landscape is layered. Low chants provide a constant undercurrent, punctuated by the distant toll of bells and the soft scrape of sandal against stone. The interplay of high and low, fast and slow, shapes perception, guiding attention and facilitating contemplation. The sense of incense and candle wax fluctuates subtly, sometimes overpowering, sometimes fading, in a slow dance with the movement of air. Every sensory input, from the tactile to the olfactory to the auditory, is part of the ritual's immersive design, creating a continuous thread connecting the participant to generations of worshippers. In quiet corners, children mimic adults, attempting to repeat prayers or gestures. Their movements are tentative, slowed by uncertainty yet gradually aligning with the established rhythm. Observation and imitation are their teachers. Repetition and careful attention transform awkwardness into precision. Even mistakes are part of the cycle, absorbed into the long rhythm of practice and adjustment, contributing to both learning and the subtle maintenance of tradition. Throughout the day, light continues to shift. Shadows lengthen and retreat, revealing new details of mosaics and icons with every subtle change. A breeze through open windows carries the distant scent of the harbor, mixing the sacred with the worldly, reminding participants that faith is embedded in daily life, not removed from it. Internal reflection considers how these repeated daily experiences of worship create a resilient cultural identity, providing continuity across the tumult of external events, invasions, and change. As rituals conclude, the faithful exit slowly, hands brushing against stone, lingering to observe detail or feel the warmth of a candle holder. The air inside the chapels retains the memory of their presence, the faint scent of incense, the warmth left by bodies, and the resonance of soft chants now fading into silence. The city resumes its busier rhythm outside, yet those who have participated carry the slow, reflective cadence of ritual into the streets, influencing posture, speech, and interaction. Evening approaches, and the shadows stretch across marble and stone. Candles are replenished, incense rekindled, and the cycle of devotion prepares to begin anew. Reflection dwells on the quiet power of repetition, observation, and mindfulness, the cumulative effect of countless rituals over centuries that fortify the city's cultural heart. Each small action, each careful motion, each attentive observation is an unseen pillar supporting the endurance of Byzantium, as much as walls or armies ever could. In these moments, Byzantium's identity is made tangible, not only in bricks and mortar, not only in defenses and diplomacy, but in the deliberate, repeated acts of devotion that bind individuals into a communal rhythm. Every gesture, sound, and scent forms part of a long, measured tapestry, an unbroken chain connecting past, present, and future. Through this, the city's citizens internalize patience, discipline, and attentiveness, learning that survival is as much in the heart and mind as in walls and soldiers. As dusk begins to settle over the city, the chapels glow faintly in the soft fading light, candles flickering like stars mirrored in stone. The air is fragrant, warm, and quietly alive with the memory of movement, breath, and devotion. Citizens emerge slowly, returning to streets that hum faintly with the residue of daily commerce, the gentle slap of water on quays, and the first murmurs of evening conversation. They carry with them the rhythm of ritual, a subtle, pervasive presence that will influence the unfolding hours and the unfolding centuries. Reflection concludes that through the slow, deliberate repetition of faith and ritual, Byzantium nurtures continuity, cohesion, and cultural endurance. The city is not merely surviving physically, but sustaining the patterns of mind and spirit that allow a civilization to flourish across a millennium. The small gestures, the bow of a head, the light of a candle, the curl of smoke from incense, accumulate into an invisible architecture of resilience, a silent force binding generations to a shared, enduring identity. By late morning, the rhythm of the city shifts once more, this time toward vigilance and preparation. Along the formidable Theodosian walls, soldiers and citizens move deliberately, carrying buckets of water to moisten newly laid mortar or adjusting the placement of stones on battlements. The walls rise in measured tiers, their height a physical manifestation of centuries of careful planning, labor, and adaptation. Sunlight glances across the crenellations, highlighting the rough texture of stone worn smooth in places by generations of hands, while shadows pool in recesses, providing a quiet contrast to the brilliance of the day. The smell of damp stone mingles with the faint tang of iron from tools and the earthy scent of mortar. Each step on the uneven surface is deliberate. Feet press against the grit of weathered rock, boots scrape lightly against mortar, and the occasional creak of wooden doors or the subtle clatter of metal tools punctuates the air. Reflection lingers on the tactile, almost intimate connection between citizens and their defenses. The city's safety is not merely a matter of stone, but of the patient, repeated work of countless hands, each movement a conscious reinforcement of security. Citizens and soldiers alike participate in maintenance, observing details with careful attention. Young apprentices carry smaller stones or mix mortar, their hands learning the necessary weight and texture through repeated experience. Elder masons watch over their work, adjusting alignment with practiced eyes and guiding hands. The air is filled with a quiet, almost meditative rhythm, the hammer tapping lightly against stone, the scratch of chisel against weathered surfaces, the low murmur of instructions. Each sound reinforces the cadence of careful labor, a slow, hypnotic pulse that mirrors the enduring heartbeat of the city itself. From the top of the walls, one can observe the sprawling city below, narrow streets weaving between domes and minarets, the busy harbor with ships rocking gently against their moorings, and the distant glint of sunlight on the Bosphorus. Scouts move along the walls, their eyes scanning the horizon, noting every change in the landscape. The movement of birds, the ripple of distant sails, the faint trail of smoke from a far-off hearth. Each observation is meticulous, a practiced combination of patience and perception, teaching that vigilance is as much a state of mind as a physical activity. The battlements themselves are a classroom of continuity and tradition. Soldiers test the tension of bows, inspect the alignment of siege engines, and practice the slow repetition of drills. The creak of wooden gates opening and closing punctuates these exercises, accompanied by the faint rattle of armor and the soft thud of feet against stone. Reflection meditates on how repetition, attention, and methodical care cultivate not only skill, but also the quiet confidence necessary for a city to endure threats that may arrive suddenly, but are always anticipated. As the day progresses, citizens carry supplies from one tower to another, their movements measured and almost ritualistic. Buckets of water are carefully balanced, ropes adjusted with precision, and stones set with deliberate care. The tactile engagement, the roughness of stone under fingers, the coolness of wet mortar, the firm pull of a rope, is experienced fully with each action, embedding knowledge and competence into the body and mind through repetition. Observation teaches both young and old the importance of coordination and trust, for the walls are only as strong as the shared attention and skill of those who maintain them. Occasionally, horns sound faintly from the outer gates, signaling arrival or movement in the distance. Soldiers pause to listen, their senses attuned to subtle changes in sound, wind, and light. Even the shifting sun across the stone surfaces serves as a guide, revealing weaknesses, highlighting worn areas, or marking time. Reflection lingers on how the city's physical endurance depends on continuous, deliberate observation, learning to read both the material world and the signs of potential threat with patience and care. Children, often brought to the walls by their parents, watch quietly from the safety of the parapets. Their small hands trace the edges of stone, feeling the weight and texture, absorbing the rhythm of labor and vigilance. Even play becomes a lesson. The careful stacking of small rocks, mimicking the work of their elders, creates an intuitive understanding of structure and patience. These observations are internalized slowly, forming the foundation for a lifetime of awareness and subtle understanding of the city's resilience. As afternoon drifts toward evening, the sun's light softens, casting long shadows along the walls. The warmth on stone surfaces gradually cools, the air carrying the faint scent of the sea mixed with dust from the city below. Soldiers descend to the gates or inner courtyards to rest, while others continue to inspect and reinforce vulnerable points. Reflection emphasizes that endurance is cumulative. The city survives not in bursts of frantic activity, but in the quiet, repeated, and patient labor of preparation that accumulates over decades, even centuries. Even the smallest details matter. A rope tied just so, a stone aligned with careful eye, a slight adjustment to the position of a parapet. Each action, repeated daily or weekly, contributes to the greater whole. The walls are not simply barriers. They are living testimonies to the patient observation, skilled labor, and disciplined coordination of Byzantium's citizens. Reflection meditates on how the slow, deliberate cultivation of defense intertwines with the rhythms of daily life, teaching lessons in patience, resilience, and intergenerational knowledge. As dusk approaches, torches are lit along the walls, their flickering light creating shifting shadows that play across battlements and towers. The faint smoke from lanterns mingles with the cooling scent of stone and earth. Citizens descend from the high parapets, pausing to observe the city below bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The rhythm of vigilance continues even in their absence. Torches guard the walls, patrols move at measured intervals, and the city's heartbeat remains steady. Reflection concludes that the survival of Byzantium is inseparable from these repeated, careful acts of preparation. The city's identity is bound not only to the stones of its walls, but to the patient labor, observation, and coordinated effort of its inhabitants. Through vigilance, careful attention, and deliberate repetition, Byzantium cultivates resilience, ensuring that the pulse of the city endures across generations, ready to face both sudden assault and the slow march of time. In these quiet, measured acts, the inspection of a parapet, the careful placement of mortar, the watchful gaze toward the horizon, Byzantium teaches a lesson in continuity. Endurance is the accumulation of countless small, attentive gestures. And as night falls, the walls stand firm, bathed in torchlight, carrying with them the silent testimony of a city that thrives not only on strategy and strength, but on patience, observation, and the slow, persistent cultivation of its own resilience. As the morning light stretches across the horizon, the city's rhythm shifts subtly, alert to a distant disturbance. Smoke rises faintly beyond the hills and forests that cradle Constantinople, curling lazily against the pale blue of the sky. It carries a message, delicate yet unmistakable. Other forces stir beyond the city's immediate view. Scouts move silently along the walls and roads, their eyes tracing every ripple in the distant treetops, every movement along far-off ridges. The soft whisper of wind through olive trees carries scents both natural and foreign, burning wood from far-off hearths, dust rising from moving feet, and the faint tang of iron. Each inhalation informs, each exhalation steadies. Within the walls, citizens continue their daily tasks, though an undercurrent of tension threads through the usual sounds of the city. Bakers knead dough with careful, repetitive motions, their hands pressing and folding in a rhythm almost meditative. Yet every now and then, a glance toward the horizon interrupts the repetition. Merchants arrange wares in markets, yet their movements are punctuated with subtle pauses, scanning the gates for news from patrols. Even the children, chasing one another across sun-warmed stones, hesitate to dart too far, sensing the weight of a city poised on awareness. Reflection lingers on how anticipation alters the ordinary, teaching the citizens to carry patience alongside vigilance, blending observation with routine in quiet harmony. Scouts, trained from youth to read the land as though it were a living manuscript, move deliberately. Each footstep is measured to avoid unnecessary noise. Each rustle of leaves or snap of twigs is noted and catalogued in silent, internal reflection. They pause frequently, listening, catching the distant clatter of hooves, the soft metallic ring of armor in the far-off hills, the murmur of voices carried faintly by shifting wind. Every observation is integrated, forming a mental map of movement and intent. The practice of observation, the slow cultivation of patience, becomes a form of quiet mastery, where even stillness is active and meaningful. The city's leaders, stationed in shadowed chambers within palaces or along the upper galleries of the walls, observe reports arriving from the scouts. A messenger bows, extending parchment with careful, practiced movements. The air is thick with the scent of ink, candle smoke, and polished stone. Magistrates read slowly, letting each word settle, understanding that hasty judgment could imperil lives. Reflection meditates on how restraint and attentiveness are as crucial as action, how the survival of a city depends on the balance between thoughtful observation and decisive movement. Throughout the streets and squares, the subtle sounds of preparation weave into the city's fabric. Hooves clatter softly against stone as mounted patrols adjust positions. Blacksmiths sharpen swords and reinforce armor, each metallic scrape echoing rhythmically across narrow lanes. The smell of heated metal and cooled stone mixes with the familiar aroma of baked bread and sea air, creating a layered sensory tapestry. Reflection emphasizes the deliberate, repetitive practices that transform anxiety into readiness. The quiet accumulation of skill, knowledge, and habit that fortifies the city beyond its walls. In the market squares, citizens participate in their own kind of reconnaissance. Eyes scan faces, noting travelers' behavior. Hands adjust ropes, baskets, and crates in a rhythm both practical and ritualized. Merchants, sensing a subtle shift in the air, move goods with gentle efficiency, balancing a tension between commerce and caution. Even the tactile engagement with familiar textures, smooth ceramics, woven textiles, sun-warmed stone, anchors them, providing continuity and grounding in the midst of uncertainty. Internal reflection considers how the mundane and the strategic intertwine, shaping a culture of awareness that sustains life through both prosperity and threat. Outside the walls, the advancing forces unfold with their own rhythm. Scouts report small movements, cavalry skimming ridges, infantry adjusting positions, flags fluttering briefly in the wind before disappearing behind the folds of terrain. The soundscape is faint, a distant drum, the clink of armor, the occasional shout, but through repetition and careful attention, patterns emerge. Reflection lingers on the subtle art of understanding intent through observation. How slow, deliberate attention to motion, sound, and scent allows a city to anticipate without panic, to act with precision when the moment arrives. Even the natural world participates in the city's awareness. Birds circle above, occasionally squawking or diving. Leaves rustle in quiet patterns along streets and courtyards. The Bosphorus laps at keys in measured repetition. Scouts and citizens alike interpret these subtle cues, integrating them into a broader sense of situational awareness. The reflection meditates on how attunement to both human and natural signals builds understanding, patience, and readiness, a silent dialogue with the world that sustains life even amid uncertainty. As the sun climbs higher, tension coalesces into focused preparation. Archers check the tension of bowstrings, adjusting each to precise standards learned through repeated practice. Soldiers reposition catapults and ballistae, testing mechanisms carefully, listening to subtle creaks and vibrations. Reflection emphasizes that mastery is not sudden but cumulative. Repetition, observation, and attentiveness shape competence and calm, allowing the city to face danger with both skill and measured confidence. Meanwhile, families and households adapt quietly, preserving continuity within the walls. Water is drawn from wells and cisterns, bread baked and stored, and small repairs made to homes and shops. Children watch elders, internalizing rhythm, procedure, and patience through slow imitation. The city's life continues in these deliberate acts, blending care with awareness, endurance with observation. Reflection meditates on how ordinary routines sustain extraordinary resilience, ensuring that daily life carries forward even as unseen forces prepare to press upon the city. Evening descends gradually, bringing long shadows and cooling stone. Scouts return, reporting incremental changes, small yet meaningful. The air carries the scent of evening fires, salt water, and faint smoke from distant camps. Citizens pause to absorb the city's contours in shifting light, the walls glinting softly, domes catching the last rays, and narrow streets filled with the low hum of life. Reflection emphasizes the quiet accumulation of knowledge, patience, observation, and the subtle interplay between vigilance and routine form the invisible scaffolding upon which the city's endurance rests. In these hours of cautious anticipation, Byzantium demonstrates a fundamental truth. The city's strength lies not only in its stone walls or weaponry, but in the measured, repeated acts of awareness, labor, and discipline carried out across generations. Each movement, each observation, each small, careful action builds a living system of resilience. And as night approaches, the city breathes in unison with the rhythm of the waters, the whisper of the wind, and the subtle signals of the distant landscape, poised to meet whatever the dawn might reveal. Reflection concludes that understanding, careful, patient, and methodical, is as vital as physical strength. Byzantium survives not merely because it can repel armies, but because it has cultivated the quiet, attentive rhythm that allows its citizens to perceive, interpret, and respond with precision. Through repeated practice, deliberate observation, and calm endurance, the city stands ready, a living, breathing testament to the power of patience, awareness, and communal effort in the face of uncertainty. As dawn rises over Constantinople, it is no longer just a city greeting a new day. It is a city braced, holding its breath against the slow, inevitable pressure of a siege. Mist drifts along the Golden Horn, curling around the stone quays and the hulls of merchant ships now repurposed for defense or store. The scent of salt and the faint smoke of distant fires hangs in the air, mingling with the more immediate aromas of bread baking, roasting grains, and the earthy damp of stone and timber within the city's walls. Each inhalation carries information, each exhalation a measure of patience, a silent preparation for endurance. Within the narrow streets, citizens move with deliberate care. Women carry vessels of water from cisterns and wells, their feet echoing softly against worn cobblestones. The weight of clay jugs in their hands presses upon their arms and shoulders, grounding them in the slow rhythm of necessary work. Children, curious yet attentive, follow the movements of elders, learning through observation that sustenance is an act of vigilance and repetition. Men stationed along the Theodosian walls check the integrity of stone and mortar, adjusting catapults, oil pans, and defensive implements with hands guided by long practice. Reflection lingers on how the minutiae of daily labor, once routine, now intensified by necessity, become acts of survival, embedding resilience in each measured gesture. In courtyards and small squares, bakers and cooks work quietly yet insistently. Grain is ground into flour, mixed with water, and kneaded into loaves, the rhythmic folding and pressing of dough echoing across stone walls. Fires glow in small hearths, radiating warmth and carrying scents that mingle with the tang of iron from nearby armaments. Reflection meditates on the interweaving of domestic and civic life. The preparation of bread is as critical as the maintenance of battlements, and each acts as a thread in the larger tapestry of endurance. Water, precious and finite, is drawn carefully. Citizens measure portions, distributing it among families, kitchens, and soldiers. The glint of sunlight on cistern surfaces, the gentle ripple as jugs are submerged, and the faint scent of fresh water remind the city's inhabitants of the delicate balance between necessity and abundance. Reflection dwells on how attentiveness, patience, and methodical care transform scarcity into sustainability, and how such acts, repeated quietly across days and weeks, maintain not only bodies but morale and hope. Along the walls, soldiers perform their rituals of vigilance. Their movements are deliberate, honed through repetition and observation. The careful adjustment of armor, the testing of bowstrings, the alignment of ballistae. The soft, constant scrape of metal against metal and the creak of wood under tension form a rhythm both grounding and anticipatory. Scouts move along parapets, noting every change in the distant landscape, each bird flight, each flicker of movement on distant hills. Reflection emphasizes the marriage of skill, patience, and awareness, and how these repeated practices form a bulwark as essential as stone. In the markets, the rhythm of life has altered but not vanished. Merchants weigh and portion supplies, ensuring that stores of grain, salted fish, and preserved goods are rationed carefully. The scent of dried herbs, cured meats, and warm bread fills the air, mingling with the faint tang of sweat and earth. Observation becomes crucial. A shift in a neighbor's routine, a slight change in demand, or a subtle sign in a container's weight may signal the city's remaining capacities or vulnerabilities. Reflection meditates on how vigilance extends beyond walls and weaponry, encompassing attention to every subtle detail of shared life. Families gather together, sitting cross-legged on stone or earthen floors to share what little sustenance they have, chewing slowly, savoring taste and texture. Each bite is deliberate, a meditation on nourishment, survival, and communal continuity. Children watch elders, internalizing lessons of patience, moderation, and the quiet dignity of care. Reflection lingers on the way's repeated, careful actions. Drawing water, cooking grain, distributing supplies, become rituals of endurance, embedding resilience deep into the social and emotional fabric of the city. Time stretches and contracts with the rhythm of the siege. Days follow nights, light flows across walls, towers, and quays, and yet each sunrise carries the weight of anticipation. The soundscape is punctuated with the occasional drumbeat of distant armies, the faint whistle of wind through towers, and the clatter of tools against stone. The city moves in slow synchronization, each individual action folding into a larger, coordinated pulse. Reflection meditates on how this patient, steady repetition is the quiet machinery of survival, the unseen work that sustains both life and morale when threat is constant. Even in moments of respite, the senses remain alert. The scent of smoke from hearths mingles with the tang of seawater. The warmth of sunlight on stone contrasts with the chill of early morning mist. The laughter of children mingles with the soft footsteps of soldiers on watch. Each sensory detail is observed, noted, and woven into understanding. Reflection emphasizes that awareness, calm attention, and disciplined observation allow a city to endure siege not through panic, but through methodical, thoughtful engagement with both environment and circumstance. At dusk, the city pauses to absorb the transition. Shadows stretch across aqueducts, the domes of Hagia Sophia catch the last rays of light, and the Golden Horn glimmers with reflections of red and gold. Citizens gather water once more, tend fires and reinforce walls, not in panic but in rhythm with established routines. The scent of bread, herbs, and warmed stone lingers in the cooling air. Reflection dwells on the continuity of practice. That enduring hardship requires not just immediate action but a sustained pattern of care, awareness, and deliberate repetition, echoing through households, markets, workshops, and fortifications alike. Night descends gradually, bringing with it both stillness and vigilance. Lanterns glimmer along streets and walls, casting soft pools of light against ancient stone. The city breathes in unison with the slow lapping of waves, the distant calls of nocturnal birds, and the quiet murmur of citizens maintaining their duties. Reflection emphasizes that survival under siege is both a physical and mental discipline, a cultivation of patience, observation, and resilience that flows through every small, repeated act. And as the city rests under star-filled skies, there is an understanding, quiet yet profound, that Byzantium endures not because of sheer force alone, but because it has built an invisible architecture of habit, care, and attentive labor. Each measured step, each deliberate task, each cautious observation during the siege reinforces the city's identity, its cohesion, and its capacity to endure. Reflection concludes that in this balance of vigilance, patience, and repeated, thoughtful action, Constantinople demonstrates a fundamental principle: that the slow, deliberate cultivation of daily life, even under pressure, ensures continuity, safety, and the possibility of a future beyond the siege. As the first pale light of dawn seeps through the high windows of Constantinople's workshops and scriptoria, it falls upon surfaces dusted with pigment, fine sand, and the faint residue of wax. The smell of ink, resin, and wet plaster lingers in the air, mingling with the earthy scent of stone and the warmth of sunlit timber beams. Craftsmen, scribes, and artists begin their day with deliberate, measured movements, hands pressing, scraping, and guiding tools across surfaces, each gesture a meditation in patience and precision. Even the faint, repetitive tapping of mallets against chisels becomes a rhythm that echoes across courtyards and corridors, a quiet song of continuity, labor, and care. Reflection lingers on how these seemingly small actions, repeated hour by hour, day by day, form the lasting backbone of culture, embedding identity and memory into the very materials of the city. In the scriptorium, scribes dip quills into ink, feeling the subtle resistance as it touches parchment. Each line is drawn slowly, deliberately, letters forming in rhythm with the scribe's steady breathing. Some pause to blot a line, to correct a small imperfection, sensing the importance of meticulous care. The scent of freshly cut parchment mingles with the sweet, resinous aroma of sealing wax, a quiet sensory orchestra accompanying the act of preservation. Reflection considers how the deliberate repetition of writing, copying, and preserving text safeguards knowledge across generations, a bridge connecting present thought to future understanding. Nearby, artisans carve intricate icons for chapels and homes. Fingers trace preliminary sketches before mallets meet chisels with precise taps. Dust rises in fine clouds, catching the morning light, coating hair and garments in a gentle haze. The smell of fresh wood, stone, and pigment mixes with the faint metallic tang of gilding materials. Reflection emphasizes how the creation of sacred and cultural objects is more than craft. It is a practice of patience, meditation, and devotion, each piece an embodiment of continuity and communal identity. Potters work at wheels, hands moist with clay, feeling its pliancy, its cool resistance, and its willingness to take shape under patient guidance. The wheel spins slowly at first, then with a controlled rhythm, the soft splash of water and friction of fingers guiding each curve and contour. Kilns await the shaped vessels, ready to infuse permanence through heat. The gentle warmth of the ovens contrasts with the cool morning air, and the scent of wet clay mingles with faint smoke from the fuel that sustains the fire. Reflection meditates on how the slow, repetitive shaping and firing of objects fosters not only skill, but a deep sense of connection to material, place, and purpose. Sculptors shape stone for public spaces and religious sites. Hands glide over surfaces to detect imperfections. Chisels lift, chip, and release fragments that fall softly to the floor. The ambient echo of tools against stone, muted by heavy cloisters and narrow streets, becomes a rhythm that guides both movement and thought. Reflection dwells on the subtle dialogue between artist and medium, how patient observation and incremental effort turn raw matter into enduring symbols of belief, civic pride, and shared memory. In the halls of learning, philosophers, teachers, and students gather beneath colonnades. The gentle rustle of scrolls, the faint scratching of stylus on wax, and the measured murmur of conversation form a quiet symphony of study. Students pause frequently, considering a phrase, a calculation, or a moral question, the rhythm of reflection echoing the rhythm of the city itself. Reflection emphasizes how observation, careful listening, and slow reasoning instill a culture of thought, debate, and intellectual continuity, ensuring that knowledge is not only preserved but cultivated across generations. Workshops for textiles, mosaics, and metalwork hum with quiet industry. The scratch of needles through cloth, the rhythmic tapping of small hammers on gold and bronze, the precise placement of tesserae in mosaic panels, all contribute to a sensory environment thick with color, texture, sound, and scent. The artisan's concentration is palpable, eyes narrow, hands steady, breaths measured. Reflection dwells on how repeated, patient practice of technical skill shapes identity, strengthens communal pride, and communicates values and stories that outlast the fleeting moments of a single day. Even the smallest acts carry significance. A brush dipped into tempera, a carefully folded cloth, a chiseled detail on a column, each is performed slowly, attentively, in rhythm with hours and seasons, sunlight and shadow, the comings and goings of the city. Reflection considers how these actions, multiplied across hundreds of citizens, create a cultural fabric that is as resilient and enduring as the city's walls. The slow accumulation of skill, care, and artistry becomes a shield in its own way, a continuity that outlives armies, fires, and the erosion of time. Throughout Constantinople, the quiet dedication of these artisans, scribes, and teachers shapes both daily life and the future. The city itself becomes a classroom, a gallery, a sanctuary. Walls absorb the echo of brushes and chisels. Floors retain the scuff of sandals and the imprint of hands. Air is infused with scents that mark labor, devotion, and intention. Reflection lingers on how the sensory richness of these spaces, sight, touch, sound, and smell, anchors memory, grounding citizens in a collective identity and shared history that no siege or upheaval can entirely erase. By midday, sunlight pours through open windows and onto stone floors, illuminating fine dust particles that float lazily in beams. Children observing artisans learn the subtleties of touch and patience without needing instruction. The city itself is a teacher, offering lessons in diligence, rhythm, and care. Reflection meditates on the quiet transmission of knowledge, how repetition and careful observation of craft and learning instills resilience, stability, and cultural coherence in both young and old. As afternoon deepens, the slow cadence of labor continues. Hammering, writing, carving, and weaving extend into evening, unhurried yet unbroken. The city does not rush. It proceeds with careful awareness, maintaining a rhythm that sustains both material culture and civic spirit. Reflection emphasizes the long arc of learning, the patient accumulation of skill, and how this deliberate, sensory-rich labor secures identity, preserves wisdom, and fortifies the city's endurance even amidst uncertainty and change. At dusk, the glow of lamps and candles extends shadows across manuscripts, mosaics, and carved reliefs. The scent of resin and oil warms the cool night air. Artisans finish their day slowly, cleaning tools, arranging materials, and reflecting on work accomplished. Reflection considers the continuity of effort, that Byzantium's endurance lies not only in stone and water, in walls and cannons, but also in the careful cultivation of learning, art, and craft, repeated across generations and safeguarded in each thoughtful, patient gesture. Night falls fully and the city grows quiet. From workshops and libraries, only the faint glow of candles remains, the occasional scratch of stylus on wax, the muted settling of stone dust, the whisper of cloth on tables. Reflection dwells on the profound significance of these quiet acts, how the patient, deliberate cultivation of knowledge and skill preserves identity, strengthens community, and ensures that the city's spirit remains unbroken, even under siege or through centuries of change. And as the stars appear above Constantinople, glimmering faintly over domes and quays, there is a sense of continuity, a city alive not just in walls and commerce, but in thought, craft, and devotion. Reflection lingers on the quiet, invisible threads that sustain culture, the accumulation of patient labor, observation, and skill that forms an enduring legacy, allowing Byzantium to endure, to inspire, and to remain a beacon of civilization even when shadows fall across its streets. Morning arrives softly over the harbor of Constantinople, a pale light filtering through mist that rises off the Bosphorus. The water laps gently against timbered piers, carrying with it the faint, briny scent of the sea, mingled with the earthy aroma of wet stone quays. Ships, their sails furled or catching the morning breeze, creak quietly as ropes shift and pulleys groan under the weight of cargo. Small boats bob in the gentle swell, their painted hulls reflecting specks of light, while gulls wheel overhead, calling in soft, repetitive cries that echo over the water. Reflection lingers on how the ebb and flow of trade is as rhythmic and natural as the tides themselves, how movement across water connects distant lands in delicate balance, and how the city's lifeblood depends on careful observation, negotiation, and timing. On the quays, merchants move with measured steps, adjusting bundles of textiles, crates of olive oil, amphorae of wine, and sacks of grain. The tactile weight of goods, the texture of coarse rope, the slick surface of wet barrels, all are felt in each careful movement. Their voices rise in soft negotiation, rhythmic and deliberate, punctuated by the gentle slap of a crate against the dock or the muted thud of cargo settling into a ship's hold. Reflection emphasizes how patience, attention, and measured speech shape relationships, allowing distant communities to trust, cooperate, and exchange resources, ensuring both survival and prosperity. Foreign envoys arrive along cobblestone streets, their footsteps muffled by dust and the soft padding of sandals. They carry gifts wrapped in silk, caskets of spices, and finely crafted objects, each presenting a sensory layer of color, texture, and scent. The rustle of silk, the subtle perfume of frankincense, and the faint warmth of carved wood communicate not only material value but also intent, respect, and understanding. Reflection considers how Byzantium's survival often relied as much on these subtle exchanges as on walls and armies, how diplomacy and observation of human behavior formed a quiet, enduring kind of power. In open squares and near fortified gates, scribes and clerks maintain careful records of shipments, treaties, and tributes. Quills scratch slowly on parchment, the sound soft but constant, a gentle accompaniment to the rhythm of the harbor. Reflection dwells on the methodical patience required to track, verify, and respond to the vast flow of goods and information, emphasizing that commerce is not merely economic, but a web of observation, strategy, and careful, repeated attention that allows a city to thrive across centuries. Caravans wind through narrow streets, guided by merchants familiar with the terrain. Wheels roll over uneven cobbles, sending a soft vibration through the ground, while the scent of dust, leather, and pressed herbs drifts in the air. Oxen and mules, laden with wares, move in rhythm with their handlers' gentle calls, each step part of a measured choreography refined over generations. Reflection meditates on how this slow, deliberate movement, repeated day after day, creates a network that connects distant lands, cultivates trust, and sustains a city whose influence extends far beyond its walls. In taverns and inns near the harbor, interpreters, guides, and sailors exchange news from foreign ports. The smell of wood smoke, fresh bread, and brine pervades the rooms, mingling with the distant toll of bells from nearby churches. Voices rise and fall in measured cadence, recounting arrivals, departures, and events in faraway cities. Reflection emphasizes the importance of listening, observation, and careful memory. How each story and report, carried accurately, ensures that the city can act with foresight, preserving both life and commerce. The rhythm of the day follows a gentle pattern. Early morning light sees the arrival of goods. Late morning brings discussions of contracts and passage. Afternoon is reserved for inspections and careful organization of storage. Evening allows reflection, counting, and preparation for the next day's movement. Reflection lingers on how this repeated rhythm, practiced for generations, instills patience, precision, and adaptability, enabling Constantinople to serve as a hub where diverse cultures, languages, and goods converge seamlessly. On the docks, artisans and craftsmen observe imported wares, taking note of techniques, colors, and materials. Silk threads are compared with locally woven cloth, metalwork studied for innovation, pigments examined for subtlety. Reflection dwells on how these quiet observations of foreign craft inspire local ingenuity, how the city's survival is strengthened not only by walls and armies but by attentive learning, adaptation, and careful integration of knowledge from afar. As the sun dips toward the horizon, the harbor softens in the fading light. Shadows stretch across the quays, and the gentle lapping of water against ships provides a slow, meditative cadence. Reflection meditates on the interplay between patience, observation, and timing, the careful measures by which the city maintains relationships, navigates risks, and preserves both wealth and influence. Byzantium's endurance is as much a product of these subtle, repeated acts as of stone fortifications. Diplomacy, trade, and measured interaction form an invisible scaffolding that supports the city through centuries of change and challenge. By nightfall, torches flicker along the waterfront, casting golden glows on masts and rippling water. Cargo is secured, sailors settle into hammocks or cabins, and the city exhales a quiet rhythm of rest. Reflection lingers on how the meticulous, patient work of trade and diplomacy is a form of resilience, an art that protects the city's life as surely as any wall. Each gesture, each careful word, and each attentive observation contributes to a network of stability, trust, and foresight, ensuring that Constantinople remains a city not merely of survival, but of enduring influence. In quiet moments, when only the gentle slap of waves against hulls and the distant cry of gulls breaks the night, one can sense the depth of the city's strategy. It lies not only in walls, fortifications, or soldiers' vigilance, but in the deliberate cultivation of relationships, the rhythmic exchange of goods, and the patient observation of human and natural patterns. Reflection emphasizes that Byzantium's strength is cumulative, arising from centuries of repetition, measured thought, and attentive care, forming a quiet yet unbroken thread connecting past, present, and future. Above the harbor, stars appear one by one, mirrored faintly in the calm waters. The city sleeps under their gentle watch, yet its networks of trade, diplomacy, and observation pulse silently, prepared for the coming day. Reflection concludes on the subtle endurance of Byzantium, how attention to detail, patience, and deliberate action allow a city to influence worlds far beyond its walls, and how the careful cultivation of connection, observation, and negotiation ensures that life and culture continue, uninterrupted, even in the shadow of change. Morning light spills over Constantinople once again, this time catching the smooth surfaces of aqueduct arches and the bronze fittings of newly repaired ships moored along the Golden Horn. The soft shimmer of dew clinging to stone and metal reflects pale gold, while the scent of wet timber, mixed with faint traces of pitch and resin, rises from workshops and docks. Engineers and laborers move deliberately, feeling the grain of timber with calloused hands, weighing bronze fittings against their plans, and adjusting scaffolds with careful precision. Each touch, each measured step, is part of a rhythm cultivated over years, one that transforms the raw materials of earth and sea into instruments of stability, protection, and progress. Reflection lingers on the quiet patience required to shape civilization, on how repeated, careful acts of observation and skill build structures and systems capable of withstanding both time and trial. On the quays, shipwrights trace lines along hulls, chisels scraping wood in soft, repeated rhythms that echo like a heartbeat across the harbor. The smell of sawdust and tar mingles with brine from the water, creating an atmosphere steeped in both labor and possibility. Reflection considers how innovation is not merely invention, but careful observation of natural forces, human need, and the tactile world. How every plank, every rivet, Every carefully curved keel is part of a dialogue between craft, environment, and the broader needs of the city. Nearby, stonemasons repair sections of aqueducts, their mallets striking the stone in a steady cadence that resonates across arches and channels. The vibration of each blow travels through arms, hands, and body, teaching through repetition the limits and strengths of the materials. Water drifts in gentle streams through completed channels, whispering a soft accompaniment to laborers' efforts. Reflection meditates on how engineering is a slow conversation with both the natural and human-made world, requiring observation, iteration, and a deep sense of harmony with forces visible and invisible. In workshops along narrow streets, artisans examine mechanisms of gates, water wheels, and pulley systems. Bronze gears are polished, wooden cogs fitted, and ropes looped in careful knots that will bear weight in the centuries to come. The soft friction of rope against wood, the metallic scrape of gear against gear, and the subtle warmth of sun on stone create a layered, tactile awareness. Reflection emphasizes that these repeated acts of precision are more than maintenance. They are the cultivation of foresight, ensuring that the city continues to function, endure, and flourish even under the strain of siege, natural disasters, or simple wear of time. Engineers convene with scribes and planners, laying out maps and calculations for the expansion and fortification of walls, channels, and docks. Ink scratches gently across parchment as diagrams are adjusted, measurements recalculated, and observations recorded. Reflection dwells on the slow, careful accumulation of knowledge, how mistakes are noted, solutions tested, and methods repeated until they become instinctive. Innovation, in this sense, is a rhythm of attention, an unhurried dialogue between mind, hand, and the enduring challenges of life in a city on the edge of continents. In the central harbor, workers guide newly constructed ships into the water. The slipways are slick with residual tar and water, the scent pungent and earthy. Hoists groan under the careful weight of cargo, while sailors step cautiously, feet brushing wet ropes and coiled lines. Reflection observes how patience, timing, and tactile awareness are essential. The success of each launch depends not on speed, but on a synchronized understanding of weight, motion, and balance, mirroring the broader demands of city life and governance. High on ramparts and towers, engineers inspect fortifications, testing the alignment of walls, the fit of battlements, and the function of gates. Wind brushes across stone surfaces, carrying the scent of sea, salt, and sun-warmed mortar. Reflection lingers on the unspoken dialogue between city and builder. Each measured observation, each repeated inspection, each careful adjustment contributes to a network of resilience capable of withstanding the sieges and storms that Constantinople will face. Alongside these practical labors, apprentices observe quietly, tracing the motions of skilled hands, noting the interplay of tools and materials, and feeling the rhythm of work. Their fingers brush the same textures, wood, metal, stone, that masters have worked for years. Reflection meditates on how knowledge, skill, and innovation are transmitted not through words alone, but through repeated, attentive observation, shaping the future while anchoring the present in care and precision. The day passes in gentle, layered rhythms. Sunlight moves across walls and water, illuminating aqueducts, ship hulls, and workshop interiors. The hum of labor is punctuated by the occasional call of a foreman, the scrape of chisel, or the soft drip of water from a newly constructed channel. Reflection emphasizes how these repeated, unhurried actions, observed over time, create a continuity that underpins the city's endurance, weaving together human effort, natural forces, and the subtle interplay of invention and tradition. As dusk falls, shadows stretch along aqueducts and quays, softening the sharp edges of stone and wood. The smell of fresh timber and heated metal lingers, mixing with the salt air and the faint aroma of nearby hearths. Reflection dwells on the continuity between day and night, between effort and result, noting how innovation and engineering are not solitary acts, but part of a sustained rhythm of attention, care, and repeated observation, linking generations through the shared cultivation of knowledge and skill. In the quiet of evening, water flows through aqueducts, turning wheels and filling reservoirs, the city's mechanisms echoing with the subtle pulse of human foresight. Ships rest in calm harbors, ready for journeys that will extend the city's influence and connection to distant lands. Reflection meditates on how the patient, repeated acts of planning, crafting, and maintaining structures, systems, and vessels create a city capable of enduring centuries, sustaining life, culture, and memory in the face of change. Night descends over Constantinople and stars emerge above the Bosphorus, mirrored in the still waters below. The city sleeps under their watch, yet the networks of innovation and engineering hum quietly in rhythm with the tides, the movement of air, and the pulse of life within its walls. Reflection concludes on the subtle power of methodical, patient, and attentive labor, the way the repeated, careful acts of engineers, craftsmen, and planners sustain a city not only through years, but through centuries, forming an invisible architecture of endurance and foresight, a quiet yet enduring heartbeat that will carry civilization forward. The morning sun rises gently over the domes and towers of Constantinople, casting pale gold light across the marble floors and polished mosaics of the imperial palace. Rays filter through high windows, illuminating gilded icons, rich tapestries, and the smooth sheen of carved columns. The faint scent of incense lingers in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of polished stone and the subtle warmth of sun-warmed wood. Scribes sit on low benches, their stylus moving slowly across wax tablets, scratching deliberate marks that will record the words, decrees, and decisions of emperors. Each stroke is quiet, measured, precise, a rhythm repeated countless times across centuries, an unhurried cadence that embodies the city's careful attention to order and continuity. Within the high chambers of the palace, magistrates and advisors move with subdued purpose, robes brushing the polished floors, sandals shifting softly across stone. They deliberate over laws, the distribution of resources, and the defense of distant provinces. Voices are calm, soft, measured. Sentences are repeated, considered, rephrased until clarity and fairness, by the standards of Byzantium's rigorous tradition, are achieved. Reflection dwells on the slow cultivation of authority. Power here is not the thunderous command of a single moment, but the patient accumulation of wisdom, observation, and careful judgment. Decisions are layered, tested, and inscribed, both literally and metaphorically, into the enduring fabric of civic life. Outside the palace, the city moves in its own measured rhythm. Guards patrol the walls, merchants arrange goods in quiet squares, and citizens navigate familiar streets. From balconies, one can hear the distant murmur of water on the Golden Horn, the soft slap of oars against hulls, and the muted voices of artisans in workshops. Within this rhythm, governance does not impose itself violently but exists as a subtle, stabilizing presence, a framework that allows daily life to continue, even under the strain of siege, famine, or political upheaval. Reflection meditates on this balance. Authority functions best when it mirrors the city itself, attentive, patient, and intertwined with the pulse of its people. The emperor, seated in a room lined with scrolls and illuminated manuscripts, observes petitions and reports with quiet intensity. His eyes linger on maps of distant provinces, tracing the routes of caravans, the locations of forts, the contours of rivers and hills. Each notation, each measurement is a careful observation, a deliberate meditation on cause, effect, and consequence. Reflection emphasizes how governance in Byzantium relies as much on perception and attentiveness as on law. Understanding the city, the people, and the wider empire is an act of patient observation, repeated reflection, and measured intervention. Throughout the day, messages arrive from provincial governors and foreign emissaries. Couriers move along shaded colonnades, their feet brushing the warm stone, their leather saddlebags faintly scented with herbs to preserve letters. Each message is read, considered, and copied, the flow of information circulating in a rhythm that mirrors both the tides and the heartbeat of the city itself. Reflection lingers on the subtle orchestration of knowledge. Through attentive, repeated care, decisions are made not in haste, but with an understanding of long-term consequences, weaving together the threads of diplomacy, administration, and foresight that allow Byzantium to endure. In quiet halls, advisors consult over the codification of laws. Hands brush over parchments, tracing lines, comparing texts, correcting errors. The soft scratch of stylus on wax resonates against stone walls, a tactile reminder of the weight and permanence of recorded authority. Reflection meditates on how governance itself is a craft, a repeated practice requiring patience, precision, and attention to detail. Just as builders, engineers, and artisans shape stone, wood, and metal, so too do magistrates and scribes shape the social and legal framework that sustains generations. Outside, the city breathes in its own rhythm. The warm sun on rooftops, the gentle ripple of the Bosphorus, the distant clatter of oars and hooves. Children watch fish leap in the harbor. Elders sit quietly, hands folded, absorbing the rhythm of daily life. Reflection dwells on the subtle symbiosis between ruler and citizen. Governance is not merely edict or command, but the careful, patient cultivation of a shared life, a framework within which ordinary acts, preparing meals, teaching children, tending workshops, can continue safely and predictably over centuries. As evening approaches, the palace gardens glimmer with soft amber light. Fountains ripple, birds stir among cypress and olive trees, and the faint scent of incense and roses drifts through open colonnades. Advisors and scribes pause, hands resting on tablets, eyes reflecting on the day's deliberations, the paths of cities and provinces stretching out beyond the walls. Reflection lingers on the temporal depth of governance. Decisions made here are not just for the next day or year, but for decades, centuries, an invisible thread connecting one generation to the next, ensuring that culture, law, and civic order endure. Night falls over Constantinople, the Bosphorus a dark ribbon reflecting stars. Lamps flicker in windows, casting warm light on mosaics, tapestries, and the worn stone of palace corridors. The soft murmur of citizens carries across terraces, mingling with the distant lapping of water and the sighing of wind through towers. Reflection meditates on the culmination of centuries, the quiet acts of observation, the repeated measures of law, the careful attention to human, environmental, and political rhythms, all coalesce into a city capable of withstanding sieges, change, and time itself. In this quiet darkness, one senses the enduring heartbeat of Byzantium. Walls, ships, and palaces are sustained not solely by stone and mortar, but by the repeated, patient care of countless individuals. Scribes inscribing decrees, magistrates weighing justice, artisans crafting objects of permanence, citizens performing daily rituals. The rhythm of these acts, repeated and observed, forms an invisible architecture of endurance. Reflection emphasizes that this subtle orchestration, attention to detail, measured action, and thoughtful observation, is Byzantium's truest strength, allowing a civilization to survive through centuries of flux and uncertainty. Finally, the city settles into a deep, encompassing calm. Stars reflect in waterways, incense drifts gently from chapels, and a distant bell tolls once slowly, deliberately. Reflection lingers on the quiet miracle of continuity, how patient governance, careful observation, repeated practice, and attentive cultivation of law, culture, and daily life have left an indelible imprint on history. The legacy of Byzantium is not merely walls or conquest, but the enduring rhythm of a civilization that knew how to survive, adapt, and flourish across the centuries. A lesson in persistence, observation, and the subtle power of human foresight, leaving echoes of civilization itself for all who would follow.